إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الناس اتقوا ربكم الذي خلقكم من نفس واحدة وخلق منها زوجها وبث منهما رجالا كثيرا ونساء واتقوا الله الذي تساءلون به والأرحام إن الله كان عليكم رقيبا يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما فإن أصدق الحديث كتاب الله تعالى وأحسن الهدي هدي محمد صلى الله عليه وسلم وشر الأمور محدثاتها وكل محدثة بدعة وكل بدعة ضلالة وكل ضلالة في النار أما بعد يقول الله تعالى في كتابه الكريم يا أيها الذين آمنوا إن جاءكم فاسق بنبأ فتبينوا أن تصيبوا قوما بجهالة فتصبحوا على ما فعلتم نادمين. In the Qur'an, Allah Azza wa Jal, He reminds the believers. He says that if an evildoer brings you any news, then verify that news first and foremost, lest you harm people unknowingly. Lest you harm people unknowingly, and that becomes a source of regret for you. Allah Azza wa Jal here, He is addressing the believers, but today we address this to our neighbors and our society around us. Verify the news that you receive first, lest you do not harm people unknowingly. Over a week ago, a tragedy took place not far from us in Southport near Liverpool. A deranged individual took the lives of 3 young girls, attacking many more in the process. He's not of any Muslim cultural descent, and he does not come from a Muslim religious background. He was born and raised here in Cardiff. I don't mention the ethnicity and the religious background of this individual because, unlike what some other people in our society believe, we as Muslims do not believe that there is by necessity any inherent malicious character tied to a race or a religion. Certainly there are good people in every part of the earth, and many people of all faiths, all they desire is justice and peace. This is how Allah Azza wa Jal, He created us. This is our fitrah, this is our natural disposition. The truth is that our khutbah today, it should be about the tragedy, that is the loss of these innocent young lives, whom we pray now rest and reside within the grace of Allah, His mercy and His paradise. The khutbah today should deal with the mental health crisis unfolding in this modern Western society that leads to such acts of senseless violence. Whether it is the stabbing of children here in the United Kingdom, or it is the shooting of kids in the United States. These are the real problems that we face as a society, and this is what we, no matter what our faith is, need to tackle. Yet unfortunately, this is not the topic of conversation today. This is not the topic of conversation today because some malicious, racist elements in our society, along with their many perhaps well-meaning but ultimately misguided followers, have chosen instead to hijack this tragedy. They have chosen to hijack this tragedy, and through dispersing false information and playing on the justified anger and confusion of people at this loss, they have found a scapegoat in innocent Muslims and Muslim immigrants. This last week has been one filled with chainsaw attacks, with intimidations, with threats against our people, against those that see themselves as being on the same boat as their neighbors. They only want the best for this society and this nation, and they act accordingly, as they always have since they have been here. And this is what I want to commence this conversation with. There are many in whose hearts there is fear about Muslims, fear about Muslim immigrants. And though this fear is unwarranted, it's not unexpected. When your politicians and the media, as well as prominent figures on social media, when they day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year, and decade after decade, when they keep feeding you that the idea that Muslims are the problem, then who can blame you for seeing them as the problem? But let's take a step back. For a moment, let's put aside our emotions and take a look at the facts. Let's take a look at history. Let's take a look at the stats. Let's take a look at the truth. Despite nearly 200 years of the British colonizing and persecuting Muslims through brutal occupation, organized violence and terror, through colonialism, when England needed rebuilding after the catastrophe of the Second World War, it was Muslims who responded. They responded to the invitation of the British to help rebuild London and many parts of the UK. Muslims did not come to this country illegally. They were welcomed and invited with open arms into a devastated, broken, ruined land in order to help rebuild it. And since then, and until today, this is what British Muslims have been doing in this country. They have been building and rebuilding. They have been improving and they have been progressing this society back to the prominence it once held. No subset of the population is perfect. And if anything, it would be expected that Muslim immigrants, many who came from abject poverty that was brought onto them by their oppressors, would suffer the most problems. But by virtue of their faith, this has proven all but false. We might not be perfect, but our positive contributions to this society prove that we are better than most. Our positive contributions to this society are more than most. Just here in London, and these are statistics that are a decade old, so it's only grown even more since then. Just here in London, Muslims own more than 13,000 businesses that create over 30,000 jobs. Just the halal food industry of the Muslims in the UK brings in over $1 billion to the economy annually. And when you include all other aspects of Muslim businesses, then this is over 30 billion pounds annually. The vast majority of these businesses are also ultimately positive for society. As Muslims, we tend to avoid businesses that include gambling, alcohol, pornography, and usury. All of these things that are prohibited by our faith for the great detriment they are to the self and society. And all of this is not even to mention that British Muslims constitute one of the largest proportional groups that give in charity annually. They give over 4 times as much as any other community in the UK. They give not only internationally to help relieve the various crises created and funded by our politicians misusing our taxpayer pounds, but they also give within our own cities and our own boroughs to food banks, charity shops, and more. Just in the month of Ramadan, Muslims donate here more than 100 million pounds. For every single second of the month, they are donating around 40 pounds or more in charity. Some claim that we do not integrate into society, and this is the problem with us as immigrants. But this could not be further from the truth. Muslims are integral members of various sectors of British and London public life. A significant proportion of our bus drivers, of people working for the TfL, of cab drivers and more are Muslims and Muslim immigrants. Many of the innovative tech startups in our city are led by Muslims, making people's lives easier and bringing them closer together. Look no further than the NHS. For a community that constitutes no more than 5% of the overall population, we are vastly overrepresented in saving the lives of our fellow citizens. Over 40,000 Muslims are employed by the NHS. Over 10% of them are Muslims. Nearly 26% of them come from Asian and Asian British backgrounds. During COVID, many of our brothers and sisters risked their lives and gave their lives, all in the service of their community. In your service. without regard for race, religion, sex. Is this not integration? Is this not the integration that you want? Or is the integration that is asked from us to partake in drinking and gambling and vile types of entertainment and other forms of social harm? Many of these far-right people that are protesting, they identify themselves as Christian. They feel the loss of their way of life and their traditional family values in this modernist deluge, in the hedonism that surrounds us. Is this what you want us to integrate into? Do you want that we should integrate into this pitiful state of affairs in which you are losing your religion and your identity, in which you are incapable of fighting against? Is this the integration that you want us to integrate into? By Allah, we will never integrate into this. Is it our refusal to succumb to the moral and spiritual decay of this age that annoys you so much? Certainly that can't be the case unless you're hypocrites to begin with. Muslims are not out to get anyone. We are not the source of any problems for these people. It is only a manufactured distraction on part of their leaders that makes them think otherwise. We share in this struggle together. We must tackle the loss of faith in the modern world together. We must keep the UK out of illegal wars and occupations that take the life of its youth with no just cause together. We must keep our kids off the streets together. We must keep them away from gangs, from drugs, from gambling, from pornography together. We must keep them off of unbridled liberalism and moral and sexual perversions and off of harming themselves and others together. And we must protect them from the true perpetrators behind these societal and spiritual ills that is serving to destroy our world together. Once again, we are on the same boat. We are on the same boat, and this boat is sinking. There are large holes at the bottom of this boat, and it is the Muslims who are at the forefront of trying to repair these holes. These people may think that they are solving the problems that they face by attacking the Muslims, but the only thing that their attacks ensure is that at the end of the day, by getting rid of Muslims, they will only ensure their own moral and spiritual demise. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين من كل ذنب فاستغفروا إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله. We are not new to racism. The Muslim community in the United Kingdom is not new to racism. And we are not new to dealing with racism either. Over 46 years ago, on May 4th, 1978, right down our very own street here, one of our young men, he lost his life for no reason other than the color of his skin and the fact that he had immigrated from a foreign culture. He was a young 24-year-old textile worker from Bangladesh. His name was Altab Ali. He had come to the UK with his father as a teenager and was working to provide for his family and to improve the society around him. He was returning home that night and had planned to vote because this was voting season. He had planned to vote and partake in the political process as a law-abiding citizen, only for him on his way back home to be killed by racist criminals. The Muslim community, they stood up back then. They took his coffin on their backs from Brick Lane all the way to Downing Street, and they continued to mobilize themselves for their own self-defense and the eradication of racism from their borough, from their city. You know, if Altab Ali, if he had been given the chance to live, he would have perhaps been here with us today. He would have been perhaps an elderly man praying in the front row with many stories to share with us all. But in his passing, he left us with lessons that are even more important. He left us with the knowledge that Allah has placed our survival and our prosperity within ourselves. He left us with the knowledge that we must never bow and cower in front of racism, in front of hate, in front of discrimination. He left us with the knowledge that we must never adopt the mentality of a victim, because by Allah, we are not victims. Rather, we are strong, we are resilient, and we are capable of overcoming any challenge that is placed in front of us, as we always have. Our history is filled with examples of perseverance and triumph, and we will continue to stand firm against those who seek to harm us. Or as in the words of the 7,000 people that marched against racism, carrying his body with them to Downing Street, we are here to stay. We are here to fight. How exactly do we fight back? This is the question. This is what we as a Muslim community need to understand and need to follow. How exactly do we confront and address the hate and the racism that surrounds us? How do we maintain the peace that we have fought so hard for all of these last few decades? I want to leave us with a few points and a few reminders, especially for the youth. It was the youth who undertook this task back then, and it is the youth who will have to undertake this task today. First and foremost, we never resort to senseless violence in response to the ignorance that surrounds us. The solution to ignorance is education, not violence, not senseless violence. Senseless violence goes directly against what our deen teaches us and gives our enemies the ammunition that they so desperately seek. But Allah Azza wa Jal, He reminds us in the Qur'an, لا ينهاكم الله عن الذين لم يقاتلوكم في الدين ولم يخرجوكم من دياركم أن تبروهم وتقسطوا إليهم إن الله يحب المقسطين. For those people who do not fight against you in your faith, they do not eject you from your homes and your life, then certainly Allah Azza wa Jal does not prevent you from showing kindness to them, from being just to them. Certainly Allah loves those who are just, and this, before anything else, is a religion of justice. This is the only religion, the only faith, the only way of life that embraces people no matter where they come from or how they come. This is why this religion is not just one of Arab, it's not just one of the Arabs, nor is it just one of the Asians, nor is it just one of the Europeans or the Africans, but it belongs to all of us together. Many of the brothers and sisters that we have sitting right here in this majlis, in this gathering today, are themselves British, that Allah Azza wa Jal guided to Islam, that are now standing for this faith and standing as some of the most firm, devout believers among us today. Number two, we must learn our deen properly, and we must reflect on our purpose and our identity. What is it that brings such hate for Muslims? What is this potent way of life that shaitan is so desperately trying to prevent others from realizing and following, that Allah has just blessed to place upon our laps? How can we stand up for our faith if we do not even know it to begin with? How can we implement the numerous lessons it teaches that can fix this society if we do not know our deen to begin with? Many of the youth that are here today, you are here on your holidays. School is off. How are you utilizing this time? If you are following into the same things such as drugs and crime that lead the people around us to see us in a negative light, then you are part of the problem. You are not from us, because we are a positive force in society. Rather, we should be using this time that we are off to learn more about our deen and to teach others about it as well. Number three, we must unite as Muslims, and we must stand together against the hate. This hate is directed towards all of us, not just some of us. Those that killed Altab Ali, they did not differentiate his nationality when they were doing so. When they were charged and they were brought to trial in the court, they were asked and they were questioned, why did you kill him? And they responded that he was just a Paki. Just that he was a Paki. This is the only word that they know. This refers to all of us. This refers to Muslims. This refers to if you put your head on the ground in worship of Allah Azza wa Jal. There is no difference between us, no matter what your race is, what your color is, what your language is. We are all Muslims for the sake of Allah, and so we must stand together for the sake of Allah, for ourselves, for one another. We need to put aside our internal differences and stand together as Muslims. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, وَاعْتَصِمُوا بِحَبْلِ اللَّهِ جَمِيعًا وَلَا تَفَرَّقُوا. Hold together to the rope of Allah, to this deen, to the Qur'an, to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, together, and do not divide in between yourselves. Number 4, we should not be afraid to raise our voices against those that seek to harm us. We should not be afraid to raise our voices and defend ourselves through peace and justice. We need to speak up and advise politicians from all sides of the political aisle. Those who on the right tell us that we need to stop the boats as racism, or they speak about Muslim women as letterboxes, or those on the left who tell us that we need to deport certain Muslim ethnicities. We need to raise our voices and speak up against them all. We need to speak against the media pundits that spin a narrative against Muslims that is completely false and puts us in danger. And we need to do the same against social media personalities that want to use this hatred for their own popularity, not caring for the loss of life and the harm that comes along with it. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, أفضل الجهاد كلمة عدل عند سلطان جائر. The best form of jihad, struggle, fighting in the path of Allah, is to speak a word of justice, a word of truth in front of a corrupt authority. Number 5, we should not be afraid to teach the deen and to speak of its values. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says that certainly He revealed to us dhikr, remembrance. رَسُولًا يَتْلُو عَلَيْكُمْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ مُبَيِّنَاتٍ لِيُخْرِجَ الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ مِنَ الظُّلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. This message of Islam takes us out of darkness and into light, and we should never be afraid to present it properly the way that it has come to us, to those that are around us. One of my closest friends is a person who is of British ancestry, and he himself comes from the far right. And when I asked him, what is it that brought you to Islam? He told me that when he looked around in his society, he saw the fall of traditional family values, the things that he took pride in. And he thought that Islam was the problem, but when he researched and he started looking, he found that Islam is the only source, the only way of life that is maintaining and upholding these values. And this is what led him to Islam in the first place. We should never be shy or hide from what our deen teaches us. And in fact, we should teach this to the world around us, because this is what they need. And this is what what will bring them out of their hatred, out of their racism, out of their injustice, to the truth and to the light. And finally, the last thing that I leave us with is that we must embody the values that our religion teaches us. We must lead by example and show those that are around us that are confused. We must show them that we are not the enemies. Rather, we are the light in this darkness of modernity that they so desperately seek. Allah Azza wa Jal, He says, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ وَلَوْ آمَنَ أَهْلُ الْكِتَابِ لَكَانَ خَيْرًا لَهُمْ مِنْهُمُ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ وَأَكْثَرُهُمُ الْفَاسِقُونَ. Certainly Allah Azza wa Jal, He says that you are the best nation that has been taken out for the people. You command the good and you prohibit the evil, and you believe in Allah. Had most of the people of the book followed the truth, that would have been better for them. Some of them are believers, but some of them are corrupt. اللهم أعز الإسلام والمسلمين وأذل الكفر والكافرين ودمر أعداءك أعداء الدين واحمي حوزة الإسلام يا رب العالمين. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا أفرغ علينا صبرا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. ربنا لا تؤاخذنا إن نسينا أو أخطأنا. ربنا ولا تحمل علينا إصرا كما حملته على الذين من قبلنا. ربنا ولا تحملنا ما لا طاقة لنا به واعف عنا واغفر لنا وارحمنا أنت مولانا فانصرنا على القوم الكافرين. عباد الله، إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله العظيم يذكركم واشكروه يزدكم واستغفروه يغفر لكم واتقوه يجعل لكم من أمركم مخرجا وأقيموا الصلاة.